I want to tell you the story of two people who were willing to sacrifice themselves to save others. The first person I want to talk about is a science officer from Vulcan. In the course of helping to save the galaxy, he sacrifices himself so his friends can escape from the danger zone of the Genesis device. However, after being given a burial in space, it becomes clear that death is not the end.
Not the end. Not the end. Just remember that death is not the end.
This officer is rescued because sometimes the needs of the few or the one outweigh the needs of the many.
Spock. I have been, and always shall be, your friend.
They probably should have kissed. The other person is a dropout teenager from a coastal city in Oregon. She becomes involved in the murder case of her best friend when her former best friend moves back home and receives powers of rewinding time. This leads to the teenager dying through euthanization in one timeline, so there was some choice there, and possibly dying at the end of the story. Of course, I am talking about future Ambassador Spock, and of course, I am talking about Chloe Price. Why? Because Spock's example illustrates that in the case of your choice at the end of Life is Strange, the game Chloe Price is from, you may think that Chloe should die to save Arcadia Bay. But Chloe is not Edith Keeler, who must die. Chloe Price must live. Edith Keeler must also live because it would make more sense to fake her death and come back and beam her way to the stars. Don't they have medicine in Starfleet? But that's for another video. Or if someone lets me write a Lower Decks episode. Spock sacrifices himself in order to prevent a warp core explosion in the Wrath of Khan. However, when the studio needed a new movie, he was revived quite miraculously. Captain Kirk and company go off to try and rescue their friend, despite violating the orders of Starfleet not to do so. This decision to save the life of their beloved friend over strict adherence to regulations demonstrates their deep loyalty, their friendship, and their empathy. This choice to save Spock, though it may seem emotionally derived and not logical, is actually very rational. Though emotions and personal connections are subjective, they may have an objective value in decision-making. The emotional bonds between Spock and crew carry weight, as do Spock's abilities. To miss out on that when given a chance is to miss out on something that, ironic when given Spock's alien status, makes us truly human. The dynamic between Spock, Captain Kirk, and Dr. McCoy actually serves as a microcosm of the balance between emotion and logic that is necessary. McCoy, a doctor who should be less emotional, often reminds Kirk of the importance of emotions, while Spock, a science officer who should have a better understanding of the biological purpose of emotions, frequently emphasizes the value of logic. This delicate balance between emotion and logic is further highlighted when Spock chooses to entrust his Katra, the essence of his mind and of his memories, to McCoy before his sacrifice.
I'm sorry, Doctor. I have no time to discuss this logically. Remember.
You're suffering from a Vulcan mind meld, Doctor.
That green-blooded son of a bitch. It's his revenge for all those arguments he lost.
Only someone so well versed in emotions can handle the highly volatile mind of a Vulcan. That's right, Vulcans, I said it.
6 times 6.
Are you trying to kill me, Spock?
It's hard to get that balance right, but Star Trek III says that it's only logical to prize our emotional connection. Spock must be saved because, from a utilitarian perspective, his unique and specific combination of logical reasoning and emotional understanding contributes significantly to the well-being and happiness of those around him, as well as to the larger society. His presence as a central figure in the Star Trek universe, working alongside Kirk and Dr. McCoy, helps to create a harmonious balance between emotion and logic, which is essential for making morally sound decisions that maximize overall happiness. Therefore, Spock must be saved over others because his balanced approach to logic and emotion leads to morally sound decisions that ultimately serve the greater good. By comparison, Chloe's journey in Life is Strange also shows how the human connection between two friends outweighs the needs of the many. Life is Strange also has it both ways. Chloe actually dies several times before the player, as Max, has to make a final decision of whether to sacrifice Arcadia Bay or keep her Arcadia Bay. They should probably kiss.
Damn, you're hardcore, Max.
Let's think about one of the places where Chloe, or a version of her, can die in Life is Strange. In Chapter 4, Chloe, paralyzed and in pain, asks Max to euthanize her.
Listen, Max. My respiratory system is failing, and it's only getting worse. I've heard the doctors talking about it when they thought I was zonked out. So, I know I'm just putting off the inevitable while my parents suffer along, and I will too. This isn't how I want things to end.
At this moment, letting her die is the right solution, as it alleviates her suffering. In addition, assisted suicide, when consensual, is morally correct, as it prevents prolonged pain and suffering on both the part of the sufferer and the family. It is also important to note that Chloe isn't just any person, she's Max's best friend. This must be considered in any calculation of what is correct to do.
To feel like when we were kids running around Arcadia Bay and everything was possible, and you made me feel that way today. I want this time with you to be my last memory.
Despite Max's desire to see her friend alive, Chloe's disability and pain are causing her and her family to suffer greatly. Alleviating that pain is the solution that maximizes overall happiness and well-being. A good friend would minimize their friend's pain when they are able to, even if, as Max starts to suspect, this timeline will be erased.
I'm so proud of you for following your dreams. Don't forget about me. Never. I love you, Max. See you around.
Furthermore, it is important to note that the game teaches players that they cannot always change their past or fix their mistakes. Max's ability to rewind time may give the illusion of control over the narrative, but ultimately, the choices she makes have consequences that cannot be undone. Eventually, she has to choose one specific path. By letting Chloe die in Chapter 4, Max learns this lesson and realizes that she cannot fix everything and must instead make the best choices she can in the present. In fact, her choice to try and fix what once went wrong, like Dr. McCoy saving Edith Keeler. Wait, should I have talked about McCoy and the city at the edge of forever? No, that's not quite what we're doing here. This is about the moral necessity that friendship places on our few or our one. This realization that we must deal with our choices instead of redoing them ultimately leads to Max being able to make the morally sound choice in the conclusion of the game. I am arguing that saving Chloe is the only choice. Chloe's relationship in Life is Strange is as significant and meaningful as the dynamic between Kirk and Spock in Star Trek. Both relationships demonstrate the transformative power of human connections and the importance of valuing individuals over abstract moral rules. Because of this friendship, it is morally wrong to let Chloe die, just as it would be morally wrong to leave Spock on the Genesis planet. The emotional bond between Max and Chloe cannot be ignored in any calculation, and the positive impact Chloe has had on Max's life and the potential positive impact she could have on others must be considered. Sacrificing Chloe would lead to a net loss in overall happiness and well-being, while sacrificing Arcadia Bay would allow for the potential for greater happiness and well-being in the long run. Ultimately, however, the choice to save Chloe is a moral imperative that honors the importance of friendship, human connection, and the acceptance of consequences in decision-making. From a utilitarian perspective, it may seem that sacrificing Chloe, a single individual, is a logical and morally sound decision, as it would prevent the death and suffering of an entire community. However, it is important to consider the emotional bond between Max and Chloe and the positive impact Chloe has had on Max's life. Chloe's presence in Max's life has brought her happiness and well-being, and this emotional connection cannot be ignored. It can also be argued that sacrificing Chloe would ultimately lead to a net loss in overall happiness and well-being. While Arcadia Bay may be saved, the emotional toll on Max and others close to Chloe would be immense, and the loss of Chloe's potential positive impact on the world cannot be quantified. In contrast, sacrificing Arcadia Bay may result in a temporary loss, but it ultimately allows for the potential for greater happiness and well-being in the long run, as Chloe's continued presence can have a positive impact on the world. It is important here to note that the differences between Chloe's request to be euthanized in Chapter 4 and her sacrifice at the end of the game. In Chapter 4, Chloe is disabled and in constant pain, and her request for euthanasia can be seen as a compassionate choice to prevent further suffering. The decision to let Chloe die at her request is not a suggestion that all disabled people should follow her example or be treated the same way, but rather that this specific choice is the best for that specific version of Chloe. That is a consensual choice. Regarding the decision to sacrifice Arcadia Bay over Chloe, it is important to consider the magnitude of the consequences in each scenario. While the loss of many lives in Arcadia Bay is tragic, sacrificing Chloe results in the loss of a unique and irreplaceable individual who has a profound impact on Max's life and the lives of those around her. Chloe's contributions to the well-being of community and in close relationships with others cannot be replaced, while the loss of Arcadia Bay, while devastating, is more of an abstract concept. Furthermore, the game's emphasis on the importance of accepting and dealing with the consequences of one action also supports this decision. By choosing to save Chloe, Max is accepting the consequences of her previous action and taking responsibility for her choices. Otherwise, she will have to erase every choice she has made to get to the point where she can make that choice, rendering everything that she has done meaningless. This acceptance and responsibility ultimately lead to personal growth and the ability to make morally sound decisions that maximize overall happiness and well-being. You can't take back the storm. In conclusion, the stories of Spock and Chloe in Star Trek and Life is Strange respectively demonstrate the complex relationship between emotion and logic and decision-making. While from a utilitarian perspective, sacrificing Chloe may seem like the right decision to save the many, it is important to consider the emotional bond between Max and Chloe and the positive impact Chloe has had on Max's life. Sacrificing Chloe would ultimately lead to a net loss in overall happiness and well-being, while sacrificing Arcadia Bay, while tragic, allows for the potential for greater happiness and well-being in the long run. Additionally, the game's emphasis on accepting and dealing with the consequences of one's actions supports this decision. By choosing to save Chloe, Max is taking responsibility for her choices and making morally sound decisions that prioritize overall happiness and well-being. Ultimately, the decision to save Chloe over Arcadia Bay is not an easy one, but is the right one for the specific circumstances and emotional bonds involved. The Arcadia Bays must live.